What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
My name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are back for week 2 of our Joseph series. And I'm excited to get into this one. I thought you had some interesting points on Sunday. We are filming this a little later, just some scheduling. I had talk confirmation on Sunday, which is when we normally film, and then we had some maybe weather that kind of
Weather
influenced.
knocked us down for 2 days. So,
Yeah, so
we're doing this on Wednesday, so
That's
you're
right.
probably getting this Thursday instead of Wednesday, but no worries. It's all good.
And just so you know, in case you happen to see breath coming out of our mouths, we are in a cold room because it's cold outside, and whatever the weather is outside, it is in here as
But
well.
I have a heated vest on.
You did. Oh, look at you. You're like glowing. You're like Iron Man over there.
Nicole gave me this.
What?
She said I had been looking cold, and and I've been wearing it every day.
So it works.
All right. Well, let's get started.
Let's do it. All right, Dave. Well, we are filming on Wednesday, so a few things have happened. We've had a presidential inauguration since the last time we've met. There's been a national championship for football since we've seen each other last. Any thoughts on either of those things?
I'll save the presidential, but the national championship was kind of what I expected it to be.
Yeah.
But not what I would have chosen for it to be. But, it's okay.
It would have been nice to see Notre Dame win. I think
And then
Ohio State just was the best team in football going
and
through.
then Detroit got beat, and that was the team I was pulling for in the playoffs. So
Who are you going with now?
I don't know.
You know, I kind of hate to say it because I'm very against the Phillies, but I kind of hope Philadelphia makes another run at it just because of how many Georgia Bulldogs have gone on to play for them. I think they've got like 7 or 8 in their defense right now.
Yeah, I kind of like the Commodores. I mean, none of the Commodores.
Commanders?
Commanders, yeah.
Yeah.
What are the Commodores? Isn't there some teams that Commodores? Vanderbilt Commodores, yeah.
I was like, I don't think so in the pros.
Not the same. Okay, well, let's jump off into this.
Yeah.
We are walking through the life of Joseph. I've really got it divided up in 6 chapters, if you will, or 6 sermons looking at his life. We started off last week, and we talked about it in the podcast last week, talking about his origin, coming from, not a perfect family. Lots of family dynamics that were dysfunctional.
Right.
And so as we talked about the first week, it was leading to a place where things are going to go off the rail. When things are left undone and they're not reconciled, it's leading to a bad place. And so in where we picked it up on Sunday, his brothers are kind of off keeping the sheep, they're shepherds. And the dad, and Joseph is, his favorite, but he sends Joseph out to sort of check on the other brothers.
Yeah.
And so while he's a long way off, they see him coming, and they start scheming and talking about how much they hated him and what they wanted to do. They initially came up with the idea of killing him.
Right.
And so you're kind of like, whoa, what has happened in this family? But then, as I mentioned on Sunday, watch any Dateline episode.
Yeah, this happens more than you think.
It happens. And there was this Dateline. I don't know if you saw it or you probably knew the story. I didn't know the story of some event that had happened here right in Cherokee County. I think it was out in Ball Ground.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I faintly remember it. I don't remember all the details to it, but I kind of remember as it was happening, hearing about it.
It was a horrible story.
Yeah.
It was this family that just they looked very successful and kind of perfect from looking outside.
Yep.
And they had the perfect family and certainly a beautiful piece of property that they had. And Dad was a successful lawyer. It's a long story short. His wife killed him, but she tried to blame it on one of the sons.
Yeah.
And it's just a really awful story.
Yeah,
just really. Yeah.
So there's your modern day example of what we're talking
And I'm
about.
not really know what we're supposed to learn from that, but it was a bad story. But this is a bad story too.
Yeah.
With Joseph, and so they get to talking, and And one of the brothers, who's the oldest brother, and I talked about family dynamics and the oldest son, he's kind of the peacemaker, and he's like, no, we shouldn't. I tell you what, let's do. Let's just throw him down in this well, which is a cistern that was dry, and that'll be punishment enough for him. So he gets down there.
We won't kill him. We'll just leave him for dead.
Well, one brother says, we really shouldn't kill these Ishmaelites. Came by. They were like they traded in spices and stuff.
Yeah.
They said, "I tell you what, he's our brother. We shouldn't kill him.
Nice.
Let's sell him into slavery.
Yeah.
We'll take the profit." And so they do that. They sold him into slavery. Which is a horrible thing. But it got into one of my first points was like how sometimes we will justify our bad behavior by saying, well, it could have been so much worse.
Yeah.
I was thinking about doing this thing, but I'll just do this thing, and it's compromise as well.
Right.
Or I think more often we look at somebody else and go like, well, I'm doing this bad thing, but it's not as bad as this other person is. And so it could have been so much worse. And so that kind of justification is also going to go off the rails at some time. And so, it sets up a discussion we could talk about like several things here. One is just the pain of betrayal, but also what it does that maybe the brothers hadn't thought through was when they got home, they had taken his coat, the coat of many colors, and they had taken an animal and killed it, slaughtered it, and put blood over it. So
made it look like it ravaged and killed the brother.
And so the dad sees this. He thinks Joseph has been killed.
Yeah.
And he goes into grief, and no one can console him. And he's going to have to carry this grief now to his grave. He said he would.
Yeah.
He'll go to his grave, grieving his son Joseph. And so now the brothers have this awful family secret that they've got to keep amongst themselves, the other 11. And so, it's just a horrible thing because, you think about why is it that, we assume that, with time, I think my point was that a rationalized sin doesn't go unnoticed by God or undone by time. Mm-hmm. And so when these bad things happen, if they're not dealt with, they're going to bubble back up in different ways. And one is, I was thinking about like the trust that the brothers would have had amongst themselves. They're carrying this secret, just a bad space. Yeah.
Yeah. If you just try to put yourselves in their shoes, not only are they kind of dealing with potential guilt of what they've just done to their brother.
And they carried that the rest, and it comes back up. I'll mention that in a second, but go ahead. Yeah.
That, dealing with the guilt, but they also now have to like you said, hold this betrayal of their, because they're now betraying not only their love for, or they're not betraying just their brother, but they're also betraying their dad because, that's a terrible thing to, like, I can't imagine.
Every time he brings it up, every time he brings his grief up, they're going to have to lie to him.
And live in that, and what do they say is like, you have to keep lying to keep your lies contained or whatever. Like,
right.
So it just puts them in a terrible situation that I don't think they recognized as they were doing it.
Right. Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. But that's just the way sin is. It leads from one thing and it goes, on and on.
Yep.
And so, but there is a scripture that comes in later. It wasn't in the main text that I read on Sunday, but I did bring it back. It's in the story going forward. I didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But there's a bad famine that's going to come on the land, and they are all sitting around saying, the reason that this is happening is because of what we did to our brother.
Yeah.
And they talk about like, he was pleading for his life as they were dragging him off into slavery. And so imagine watching their brother go through that is something else that they've had to live with all those years.
Man.
So it's,
I really can't imagine that circumstance, but you brought up a good point when you're talking about sin and how like it kind of compounds on itself where, maybe one little lie here or one way that maybe you talk bad about somebody and like how like when you let those things continuously happen, how like it kind of just builds up this barrier between you and God, or you and your self-conscious even, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it is interesting.
So, one of the points I made was that betrayal is one of the deepest wounds we can experience.
Yeah.
Whether it's happening to us or whether we were somewhere adjacent to it. Maybe we were part of the persons that betrayed them.
Yeah.
I was thinking in particularly of a situation that happened years ago, and a work-related experience I had, where there was a person on a staff that I was on. It was a big church and it was a big staff. And she kind of became the scapegoat for a lot of things. And I was her friend, but I did not stand up with her, and probably contributed in some ways to her. She wasn't fired, but she left.
Yeah.
And I felt bad about that for years. And I was somewhere, some retreat or something, and they were talking about forgiveness and stuff like that. And I just felt the need to reach out to her and ask forgiveness, because I was living with this thing.
Yeah.
And so I wrote her a letter and sent it to her. And it had to be the second that she got it, she called me up on the phone. And, it was just like dealing with that. And because she immediately forgave me and all that, and just all of that pain that I was carrying through that just kind of evaporated.
Yeah.
And why we choose to live in a difficult space rather than dealing with it, I don't know, because, and sometimes, it's no guarantee that the person's going to be as nice as she was and as forgiving as she was. But, if it's left undone, it just keeps going on. On the other hand, if we're the ones that have been betrayed.
Well, and I have a story, I want you to make your point, but I have a story where I felt betrayed, and it was actually a work-related incident as well, where I had a really good relationship with one of my coworkers, just friendship, it was very professional, all that stuff, but we were close where I got to get to know the family a lot more and stuff like that. And then there was a space where this person was just dealing with a lot of sickness and was on a lot of like pain pills and stuff like that. And eventually it became a spot where me and a couple other people on staff, we weren't sure what to do, because she started vilifying everyone else around and started kind of really painting this picture that, she was about to die and all that stuff. And she actually called me and one of my other coworkers over to tell their kids that she was passing away, because she made us believe that it was inevitable. And it ended up being that she fabricated all of that to try to get away from her spouse. And that really hurt, that we were pawns.
Coerced, yeah.
We felt betrayed of how we were trying to be, some, strong for her. We were trying to be a backbone to help her keep going, but ended up being that she was just, using us as a pawn to get away,
And so trust in relationships, it takes a lot. It's interesting. I was working on something this morning about vulnerability.
Yeah.
But being vulnerable with somebody and authentic with somebody, and then having somebody betray that trust, is one of the most horrible things that can happen.
Yeah.
And if it makes us get in a space where we don't want to trust somebody else.
Yeah.
I can't not be vulnerable with this person.
Right.
I can't be honest with this person, or they'll betray the trust. And so that's just not the way God intends it.
Yeah.
And so it takes a while to get through that. And so
I mean, I think I'm much better now, but there was definitely a while where, kind of like you're saying, like it just, I know I didn't want to freely get that close to people and to be hurt like that again. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it took a little while. It took me being away from the situation for a while, and honestly moving away from that area, to kind of like fresh start it a bit.
Yeah, I get it.
Sorry.
Well, so anyway, Joseph is the one who has, been betrayed.
Yeah.
And so he's, how is he going to react? And what we see is a lot of growth in Joseph. And I'm sure he had time. And we talked about this a little bit last week. What we don't see is the passage of time.
Yeah.
But because he was pretty immature, pretty proud, pretty full of himself. But we're seeing what's emerging out of the pain that's happening in his life. It's growing character for him.
Yep.
And so he is sold into slavery to this guy named Potiphar, who was like one of the assistants to the Pharaoh, to the king.
Yep.
So he's a pretty important man. And so this is where he is going to be a slave.
Yep.
And so when he gets there, he shows incredible integrity because he starts doing the next right thing. The scripture says that God was with Joseph.
Yep.
But Joseph was also with God because he starts, and we'll see it in the sermon this week too. He really starts living with a lot of integrity and moral character and all those sorts of things.
Really just kind of makes the best of the situation.
He does. I mean, and there's no guarantee that like God's going to deliver him from all this. We're in, kind of the first third of the story now. But he's there and he's doing the right thing, and God is blessing that. And through Potiphar sees what an asset he is. And so he starts putting him in charge of the other servants and other affairs of the house. And suddenly, the scripture says that Potiphar just trusted him with everything. Except what Potiphar was eating and drinking, Joseph just took care of the rest. And so he was being faithful in the place that he was. Yep. Faithfulness matters. How we respond in difficult situations, it shapes our witness. It'd been very easy for Joseph to sort of withdraw and say, all these horrible things have happened to me and I'm the victim here. But instead, he decides to walk with tremendous character in that. And that is a lesson for us because life is not fair a lot of times.
Yep.
And so rather than falling into victimhood, we just need to fall into our Christian faith, which is taking the next right step. Doing the next right thing. And that's what we see in Joseph.
How what's the, I guess like footprint to do that? I think that's such a hard task to do. I feel like a lot of times we say like, a lot easier to say than to do, but like, what is a step we can take to help ourselves live with as much integrity and faith? I think part of it is leaning back into what we read in the Bible and being reminded, like, yes, we can stand firm and walk straight, or kind of put our heads down and get through it. But
I think part of it we can go back with the brothers and this justifying of doing what they perceived as being a lesser evil. And it was still evil. What way? I think when we find ourselves in those situations is to pause and reflect, is this going to honor God?
Yeah.
But to get more to your point, I think that it takes, we've talked about this a number of times too, the self-awareness of where the pain is and to deal with our own pain. But when it comes to what we do outwardly, it may be faking it till you making it, but what is it the next right thing to do? And working, we're not going to do it perfectly. We're going to lose our tempers sometimes. We're going to be angry. We are going to feel like the victim or whatever. But I think being aware of that, trying to grow a little every day. In that, and giving it over to God and surrendering those parts of ourselves that that we're holding on to that are impeding our progress towards mental health, towards spiritual health.
So kind of like basically the places where we feel hurt, we kind of take a step each day to make that better. We're not expected to try to just 180 it and ignore it and just like...
Yeah, we don't have
whatever,
the passing of time. I'm sure it wasn't like suddenly one day he was, where we see him and eventually the man he grows in.